I want to bring in somebody who has been watching not just this case, but the case we talked about at the top of the broadcast in Brooklyn Center very closely. That is Ben Crump, a civil rights attorney, of course, representing both the families of Daunte Wright and George Floyd. Mr. Crump, good morning. Thank you for being back on our show.
Good morning, Hallie.
Let me start with that developing news that has happened just in the last couple of minutes here. As you heard, I hope, from our analyst and our reporter just a moment ago, Judge Cahill, in the case of Derek Chauvin and his trial, quashing a subpoena for Maurice Hall, who was with Mr. Floyd before his death. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I agree completely with Attorney Charles Coleman that it's significant, but they had to anticipate that this was a long shot. The fact that Maurice Hall does have a constitutional right to Fifth Amendment privileges against self-incrimination. But Hallie, I think it wouldn't matter either way it goes. The video tells us from day one that Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd and should be held criminally liable. And everything else that the defense does is just a distraction, an attempt to make us look away and not focus on that video that over 50 million people have viewed on the internet alone. It's the most witnessed murder by a police officer of a citizen unjustly.
You, Mr. Crump, are at the center of two of the biggest stories in the country right now, both happening in Minnesota. You represent both of those families involved. Let me ask you about the one out of Brooklyn Center, the death of Daunte Wright, and the now former officer, Kim Potter, resigning. Is that enough for you? And how confident or not are you that the prosecutor might announce charges against her?
Well, the family doesn't think it's fair that she could claim it was a mistake that I killed him and should be able to retire and have all her benefits and pensions and ride off into the sunset. When they think about this and when our legal team thinks about this, this is a 26-year veteran who is training young officers. She knows that the duty gun, her duty weapon is on her dominant hand, Hallie, and her taser is on her non-dominant hand side. And so the gun weighs 2.6 pounds. The taser weighs 8 ounces. The gun is all black. The taser has bright yellow painted on it. And so at some point you have to say, you intended to pull this young man over. You intended to do the most, which they often do with marginalized minorities, especially black men, especially when you consider what's been happening with the lieutenant in Virginia. You consider that they could have given Daunte Wright a ticket and told him that he needs to get the tag registered. They could have given him a notice to appear for the misdemeanor warrant. This is a misdemeanor. And just like George Floyd, they could have given George Floyd a ticket for the alleged $20 fraudulent bill. But when it's black people, they seem to engage in the most use of force possible, and it ends up with deadly consequences. So the family is not gratified that she resigns and gets to keep her pension and benefits while they have lost Daunte forever. It is not fair.
So what do you want to see? What is justice in that case?
Well, justice is her being held accountable to the full extent of the law. We believe she should be charged with manslaughter of some kind. The fact that, Daunte was trying to get away from them. Like most marginalized minorities, they try to run from the police because bad things happen when the police engage them. My guy, he lives in Minneapolis. He just saw George Floyd tortured to death with Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Can you imagine what every black person thinks now when the police pull them over, especially in Minneapolis? And I'm just outraged at the fact that this could happen 10 miles from where they're having the court with Derek Chauvin trial regarding the killing of George Floyd, and that you would expect every police officer will use the greatest standard of care. They would do their best to try to de-escalate.
So do you plan to sue? Do you plan to pursue a civil case?
We plan to explore every legal remedy possible for the family of Daunte Wright to get justice. We know that this criminal justice system often fails Black people when we are killed unjustly, and it just plays out over and over again. They can de-escalate just fine when it's white American citizens like what we saw at the insurrection on January 6, 2021, but when it's an unarmed Black kid trying to run away from them, they see that as a threat where they're going to use some measure of force. When they had his tag, they knew the car, they did not have to use this kind of force to engage this young man. And it's just, Black people in America are just frustrated and outraged that this would happen within 10 miles of where what I believe is the most consequential civil rights police use of force case in the history of America.
We talked about how you represent not just the family of Daunte Wright right now, but the family of George Floyd as well. And I understand that later this afternoon, you are expecting to make an announcement, billing it as a major announcement. Can you give us a sense of what you're expected to reveal, Mr. Crump?
No, we're just going to give updates on both cases. I'm actually at the National Action Network convention here in New York with Reverend Al Sharpton, as well as Congresswoman Karen Bass. And we know that they are contemplating whether to charge the officer or not. I believe that decision will be announced at some point, and we will give a reaction to whatever the county district attorney or put decides.
Very quickly before I let you go, do you anticipate that what is happening in the case of Daunte Wright could have an impact? Do you think it might have an impact in what is happening in the trial of Derek Chauvin? And how do you anticipate that unfolding now in the next several days? As we know, the defense will finish its case, will presumably rest, deliver closing arguments, and the jury will deliberate.
Well, you know, Hannah, I'll be frank. I just have to speak truth to power when you get a chance. I know that people tend to believe that juries don't follow the law, but they do follow the law. They try to listen to the judge's instructions. But it just infuriates me that when a white person kills a Black person, especially a police officer or somebody claiming stand your ground, everybody asks, well, can they get a fair trial? Will they get a fair trial? I have never seen in my professional life when a Black person is accused of killing anybody that people are concerned whether they're going to get a fair trial or not. It almost seems as if we go out our way when white people kill Black people to try to be the most sensitive, compassionate people. When you look at that video, there was no compassion, no humanity extended to this unarmed Black man who was face down and handcuffed named George Perry Floyd Jr.
So what are you saying? Are you saying that you believe that the jury is perhaps being persuaded by the defense arguments right now?
I don't take it for granted at all, Helen, that a police officer will be convicted for killing a Black person unjustly, no matter how much evidence we have. I've been a civil rights lawyer all my professional career, but I've been Black all my life. And what history has shown us is that there is not the same value given for Black life in America that is extended to our white brothers and sisters. And so we know that the defense is going to get every consideration possible. History has taught us that. A white person who kills a marginalized minority in America is always given the greatest consideration. We just pray that when we're accused of crimes, that we can get equal consideration so we won't have so many Black men wrongfully convicted sitting in prisons for decades before they are proven innocent by organizations like the Innocence Project and Equal Justice Initiative.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.